The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work.
We will start off with comments from our federal and state agency representatives. I know Melissa's told me she didn't want to speak this evening. Eric, do you have anything you would like to bring before the board? Any updates, anything?
I've got some updates, yeah.
Good. Yay.
I didn't want to speak.
Yeah, you're supposed to speak in Spanish.
Okay.
Time for you.
We're out of the book.
Very, very special to us.
You don't want to feel like I'm taking.
For she's allotted her time.
First time out. This didn't have something to say.
Good evening, everyone, and it's good to see you all here tonight. A couple of updates since the April meeting. I've got a couple of notes on some things that we've done. We successfully shipped a reactor vessel from the low intensity test reactor to out of state disposal. That actually went to Utah. I got to see some of that work as they were actually packaging that, and it was just an amazing piece of work, lifting that, putting it in the packaging and getting that sent off site. I think we've actually heard from the folks in Utah that they've actually completed the disposal of that. I think that actually happened last month that they completed the disposal. So that is a piece of work that we can actually say is completely finished, which is really nice. Our contractor recently actually moved the 100th canister of uranium-233 at the U-233 project. That's a really important project. That is probably EM's highest priority project for Oak Ridge, if you look across the complex, and one that we'll continue to focus on, obviously. We had a HQ priority goal. We do annual priorities goals with the Office of Environmental Management. We had a priority goal to process 35 canisters in 2024. We're actually at about 50 canisters, and I think we're going to do a lot more before the end of the year. So we're doing really well. We've exceeded our priority goal, and we're going to continue going. Last meeting, we talked a lot about early site prep activities at EMDF. Now it's full steam ahead on the second phase, which is the groundwater field demonstration. I've had a chance to go out there and take a look at that. It is really amazing to see. I think I was there for the groundbreaking, and it was fairly wooded and hilly and some really, I'll say, unimproved terrain. And today, I don't know if any of you would recognize it if you're used to that area. What's amazed me, I think, the most is managing the timber that's been cut out there, and also managing the amount of soil that's being moved, which has been an incredible amount. I think for the mulch alone, UCOR created something like 15,000 cubic meters of mulch. I mean, that's an incredible amount of mulch. It was a mountain of mulch when I went out there. It was just amazing. UCOR was extremely efficient working with other programs and areas on site to basically manage that mulch, use it for some of our own projects, but I know we gave some of it to NNSA for their projects as well, for ground stabilization and control and other things. So UCOR has been extremely efficient at managing, I'll say, the large amounts of soil and other materials that we've created from that early site prep. So things are going really well on that project. July 11th, we're holding a guided tour out there to showcase the progress. And of course, all SSAB members are invited to attend that. I'd encourage everyone to go out and see it for themselves. It is really amazing to see the work that's been done out there. We're also excited to announce that we signed 2 records of decisions with our regulators for groundwater at ETTP. As I understand it, both of these RODs were signed without disputes. And I think that's the first time that's happened since the ARRA days. Did I get it right? Or maybe ever, perhaps?
It's been over 20 years since we signed a ROD without a dispute about it.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So that's a huge accomplishment for us, obviously. Last thing I'll mention is a little bit of EM program news. So for the Office of Environmental Management, some of you may be familiar that the senior advisor for EM, the leader of the EM program, Ike White, he was recently nominated to take a position on the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board. And interestingly enough, at one time in his career, he actually started with the Dean FSB. So he's kind of going back to where he started, except he'll be a board member, which is fantastic for him. He's actually leading the EM program as the leader. This week is his final week as the leader of EM. And so starting next week, Candace Robertson will be the new senior advisor. She is not acting. She is actually the senior advisor for EM. So she'll be the leader of the EM program. This is just a guess on my part, but given that we're looking at an election and likely a new administration, no matter what, there's always new people, whether it's a continuation of the current administration or an entirely new administration. Given that, I would expect Candace will likely be in that position until the new administration makes a decision on what they want for leadership for the EM program. So I know there's SSAB chairs meetings coming up in the fall. In fact, I believe we're hosting the SSAB chairs meeting in the fall. So I assume you will have the opportunity to meet Candace probably in the near future. And we're also going to try to get her out to the site for a visit as quickly as we can.
Thank you. That was a great update. Let me tell you. We were all over here taking notes. Roger.
I don't have anything to add.
So you allotted your time also there.
Yeah, he hit all the good, and we were just talking about right before the meeting started. I want everybody, and Sam will go into this. It is very difficult to overemphasize how important these two groundwater. These are the first tri-party agreements on groundwater remediation that we've had on the reservation. We've been doing this for 33 years. So, I mean, this is a big deal. And one of them is a final groundwater decision. And those are on DOE sites, those are few and far between. So, I mean, it is really hard, again, just hard to express what a big deal this is. So Sam's going to give you a lot of good detail about this, but I like saying that over and over again. That's it.
Samantha.
Yeah, hi, I'm Samantha with EPA. I wanted to announce that EPA Region 4 nominated this Oak Ridge site, specifically East Tennessee Technology Park, for a national excellence, federal facility excellence in site reuse. And each of the 10 regions can nominate a facility, and I'm just grateful to announce that Oak Ridge won.
Great.
That's wonderful.
Cool.
Thank you. Christoph.
Good evening. I have just one announcement. Annual update to the site treatment plan was made available to public and local communities for review and comment. The comment period ends with the end of July. That's all for me.
Short and sweet. Thank you. We will now have the introduction of our speaker.
Sam Shelford. Sam is the Groundwater and Water Quality Program Manager for the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Office. He has been with DOE OREM just over 2 years. Before joining DOE OREM, Sam worked for the Ucor subcontractor RSI Intech as a field technician, supporting water quality in the Water Resources Restoration Program. Sam has a Bachelor of Science degree in geology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville.
Welcome, Sam.
Hey, thanks very much, Chris. First thing I should say is time flies when you're having fun. I've actually been here for 4 years now. I guess that would have been from the previous time that I gave an update on East Tennessee Technology Park groundwater. Of course, returning board members may recall Roger Petrie's presentation last year around this time on the K31 and K33 proposed plan. This year, I'm broadening back out to cover the entirety of groundwater as we've divided it up at East Tennessee Technology Park, because as Eric alluded to, we have some exciting news to share. All right, so this is just an overview of the presentation. I'm trying to remove that large hand.
It should go away. Oh,
I'm apparently technology is hard for me, I guess. So anyway, I apologize for that. I promise I'm not putting that in there. Anyway, this is an overview of the presentation. I'm going to start for new board members just to orient y'all with where exactly it is we're talking about this evening. And then I'm going to do a very brief history of how we got to where we are today. And then I'm going to go into a bit of detail, sort of a status update on each of the 3 subunits for groundwater at the East Tennessee Technology Park, those being K31, K33, the main plant area in Zone 1. And then, of course, we'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation. So firstly, for those new board members who may not know exactly where it is we're talking about, the figure on the left shows in a red outline the entirety of the Oak Ridge Reservation. And y'all may be familiar with some of the names you see up there, like Bethel Valley and Belton Valley associated with Oak Ridge National Lab, or Bear Creek Valley and Upper East Fork Poplar Creek, closer to Y12. This evening's focus is on the far western side of the reservation, being East Tennessee Technology Park. That area shown in the bluish purple rectangle there, partially bounded by the Clinch River. And that, yes, thank you, because I don't know how to control that apparently. That area is enlarged in the figure on the right and reoriented a little bit. And this figure on the right also shows those 3 groundwater subunits as we've divided them up. Those Zone 1 in yellow, K31, K33 in purple, and the main plant area in green. And I'll go into a bit of detail on each of those in the following slides. But first, a little history. Back in 1991, the U.S. Department of Energy, United States Environmental EPA, and the state of Tennessee signed the Tri-Party Federal Facility Agreement for the Oak Ridge Reservation. Then proceeded in the 1990s to address offsite contamination, and those areas that are high risk were prioritized, high risk releases to the environment. Then throughout the 2000s, the tri-parties came together and divided up the entirety of the reservation into what we call administrative watersheds. The reason being it's obviously easier to make a decision on a smaller area. And generally speaking, those areas share similar features, similar geology, hydrogeology, and similar histories as far as their active use for DOE's previous missions. Then over the past couple of decades, we've done loads of work across the entirety of the reservation, but specific to East Tennessee Technology Park, there has been a whole lot of building deactivation and building demolition, followed in sequence by soil remediation and soil excavation, all leading up to this point in time where we are now finally able to turn our focus to groundwater, the next media in our remediation, our cleanup sequence. So again, here are the 3 subunits for groundwater at East Tennessee Technology Park. I'll start with K31, K33, that area in the middle in purple. That is, of course, the former, it contains the building footprints for the former K31 and K33 buildings that were used during the uranium enrichment process at the K25 site. The main plant area to the east side of Poplar Creek, you can think of as generally the footprint for the Oak Ridge gaseous diffusion plant that is home to the K25 building proper footprint, along with the majority of facilities that were constructed for that plant. And then Zone 1 is sort of that yellow perimeter that you see there. Generally speaking, this is the less developed area at East Tennessee Technology Park. While it did hold several uses during the site's active time at K25, such as waste handling and power generation, generally speaking, it is much less developed than the main plant area. So now I'd like to go into a bit of detail for each of these projects, starting with K31, K33, because we have that exciting news to share again that the record of decision for K31, K33 groundwater was signed just last month on May 9th. And this is a big deal for a number of reasons, but the one that sticks out to me is that it is the first of its kind in Oak Ridge. It is the very first groundwater specific record of decision to be submitted on the Oak Ridge Reservation. And that really just emphasizes all of the work that's been done up to now to allow us to now focus on groundwater at East Tennessee Technology Park. So the selected remedy for this decision is monitored natural attenuation alongside land use controls. And I will go into detail on what both of those mean in the future slides, but a little bit about the decision. It's of course limited to groundwater at the K31, K33 area. We have detected contamination in a limited number of our current monitoring wells. We have a monitoring well network of 21 wells there at present. Generally speaking, those concentrations have gone down or trended down since we began monitoring there. And in our most recent sampling of a subset of this monitoring well network, we did not see any exceedances of maximum contaminant levels. So in the last comprehensive sampling event that we did during the remedial investigation and feasibility study, where we sampled all 21 of the wells in our well monitoring network, we did see 2 exceedances of drinking water standards for 2 separate contaminants of concern. And the location of the wells where those exceedances were found are highlighted in that figure on the right, alongside the concentrations that they came with. So one had an exceedance for nickel, the other had an exceedance for chromium. And you will note that neither of those exceedances is more than 2 times the maximum contaminant level allowable in drinking water. So while that is to say they are very much still exceedances of that maximum contaminant level, they are relatively low exceedances. And as far as land use controls go, there are a number of land use controls associated with K31, K33 area that are called out between the record of decision and the deed restrictions for these parcels, as this land has been transferred out of DOE ownership. But the one that I wanted to bring to your attention tonight is a prohibition on groundwater. That means that that use or exposure of groundwater is not allowed without a prior tri-party approval. So EPA, TDEC, and DOE would have to approve any use of groundwater before any landowner were to use it. A little bit about the remedy, monitored natural attenuation. This is basically allowing natural processes to reduce the concentrations of contaminants in the groundwater. And we know that it's applicable to our contaminants of concern being chromium and nickel. This goes alongside continuation of monitoring these wells in our well network, and I'll speak a bit about that on the next slide. So the very first thing that we need to do now that we have a record of decision signed and our remedy is selected is to develop a remedial action work plan. And that is going to go into the details and the specifics of how exactly we're going to implement this remedy. Frequency of monitoring or frequency of sampling these wells, which wells need to be sampled, and whether or not we need to put new wells in to monitor. So the decision that we have in place allowed for up to 8 new groundwater monitoring wells to be added or installed to this site should we deem it necessary. Those details will be included in the remedial action work plan. And again, I just wanted to highlight that groundwater prohibition land use control will be implemented throughout the remedy. So it will continue to take place with this remedy in place. Now that was the last slide I had on K31. Sorry, it's sort of a harsh jump. Now we're moving across east or Poplar Creek to the east side to the main plant area, where just 1 week after we got our first ever groundwater specific decision signed for Oak Ridge Reservation, we got our second groundwater specific decision signed, being the main plant area interim ROD. Being an interim action, this means that it will be followed by a final action. So this is a more specific action that only covers 6 chlorinated volatile organic compound source areas within the main plant area. And I should mention the selected remedy in this case is enhanced in situ bioremediation with that same groundwater prohibition land use control in place. There are a number of other land use controls, and some of them differ between K31, K33 and the main plant area, but the one that I wanted to mention today is constant between the two. That is that groundwater prohibition. As this is an interim action, we are, like I said, focused on those 6 chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes, and more specifically, we are focused on the highest concentration areas within those 6 chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes. I'm really trying not to use any acronyms tonight, so I'm sorry if I slip up. By implementing this interim action, we'll do a number of things. Firstly, we'll feed that final groundwater decision for the main plant area with all of the data that's collected through this interim action and better delineate these 6 chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes to better inform the final groundwater decision here. Secondly, we're going to significantly reduce the concentrations in these highest concentrated areas for these groundwater source areas. And thirdly, we're going to learn a lot about this technology we're using in our selected remedy, enhanced in situ bioremediation, and how it may be used not just in a final action here, but also across the entirety of the reservation. So other areas outside of ETTP. This figure shows highlighted in yellow, those are the 6 chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes to be addressed within this interim action. More specifically, it is those orange areas. Those, if you look at the plume legend, those are the highest concentration areas. And then we will, of course, follow this with a final action that will incorporate those gray labeled areas, as well as the yellow and green surrounding areas of those chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes with a lesser concentration. A little bit about enhanced in situ bioremediation. I'm going to preface this by saying I am not a chemist, as you heard in my introduction, or a microbiologist. So if there is a heavily technical question, I will likely phone a friend, but we have some subject matter experts here with us that will surely be able to answer them. But from a very high level, enhanced in situ bioremediation is the use of naturally occurring microorganisms, injecting those microorganisms along with what we call an amendment. And an amendment in generally speaking is an emulsified vegetable oil into the subsurface. That emulsified vegetable oil then ferments and lets off electron donors in the form of hydrogen and acetate. The microbes then use those electron donors to sequentially break down fluorinated volatile organic compounds into harmless byproducts. In our case, we're starting with a trichloroethene, TCE, as you may know it as, that was used as a solvent across the site for K25 in its active mission. And so we're taking basically trichloroethene, that's broken down into a dichloroethylene, that's broken down into a vinyl chloride, and eventually broken down into ethene. And then, of course, we're monitoring the effectiveness of this remedy throughout the entire implementation. So I don't want to belittle the amount of work that it's going to take to implement the interim record of decision for the main plant area, because it's a lot. First, we're going to do pre-design investigations that will better define and delineate these chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes, and we'll learn how exactly this injection process is going to work. And then that will be followed by a remedial design work plan that will be much more detailed of the exact implementation of the interim action. But eventually we will have to shift focus to a final groundwater record of decision for the main plant area. And I listed two goals here that we'd like to see done in our remedial investigation and feasibility study for a final main plan area groundwater remedial action. Those being to fully delineate these chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes. They're in their entirety, both laterally and vertically. And then secondly, to understand the nature and extent of the other contaminants of concern that may exist in the main plant area, as the interim action is specific to volatile organic compounds. So moving on to our third and final subunit for groundwater at the East Tennessee Technology Park. This is zone 1. It's shown in an orange outline here. This project is a little bit earlier on in the CERCLA process than where K31, K33 and the main plant area interim ROD or records of decision are. We, since the last time that I spoke to you all, have gotten a remedial investigation work plan approved. This is a stage of work where we are trying to fill all data gaps, and eventually we'll compile that data and put it into what we call a remedial investigation report. Then we will do a feasibility study where we weigh the different alternatives for remedial action for this area. And I wanted to include this project as well to let folks know that, you know, we are working on all 3 of these subunits for groundwater in tandem. But this project is just a bit earlier on in the CERCLA process than the other 2 that I discussed this evening. And that is all I have. I'm happy to take.
We'll take questions from the floor first and then online. Christine.
If you could go, and the one first.
This is a test.
What does alpha activity mean?
Alpha activity, so it would be like radioactive alpha.
Radiation's measured in, there are different kinds of radiation. There's one that's called alpha radiation. There's beta, gamma, and then there's no neutron. And alpha typically is associated with your uranium products. It's if you're trying to find how much uranium you have, you do both an analytical for the presence of the metal, and then you use alpha analysis to determine what kind, like U-235, U-238,
Okay,
U-234, those sorts of things.
thank you.
Mary.
Go ahead, Mary. Go ahead. Yeah, okay. Okay. I might be missing something, but I remember last year we had this discussion, and I thought you had the interim ROD approved last year for the main plant area for the in situ bioremediation. Not approved last year?
We didn't have it approved, but I do think we got a recommendation from the board 2 years ago that was in favor of that selected.
Yeah, we approved it last year too.
Yeah.
Approved, they go ask. I guess I was under the impression that you guys were ready to start injecting the vegetable oil.
Not quite yet.
Fall.
No.
Okay.
So we still needed to get the record of decision signed by the tribe.
We had to tweak a few things maybe and then get the final. Gotcha. Thank you.
Harriet.
Mine's a money thing. What does it cost to put in a well to monitor a plume?
Well, it's highly dependent.
More or less, ballpark. Are we talking?
Bob, do you have a number for this?
It's very dependent on how deep the well is.
Yeah.
The size of the screen and screen materials. So, and whether or not they're single screen or they're complicated like west space.
What kind are you gonna be doing for your main plant area where you're thinking about you might need?
We'll be doing conventional, probably 6-inch diameter, maybe rotosonic holes. And we'll probably use mostly 1-inch and 2-inch screens, PVC. We are going to be putting on a different project in some exit pathway wells that are going to be deep West Bay multi-ports. But for the remedy, it's gonna be relatively simple screens, and typically it's gonna be 10 foot to maybe 100+.
So you're talking, when you say multi-ports, you're talking digging vertically and then digging horizontally?
No horizontal. It's just a complicated technology that allows you to isolate vertically within one.
What you want. Okay, thank you.
But that's not associated with the injections. That's a different project. Trying to characterize vertical gradients, and see what's going on, deep within the well.
In the future, you'll put in an injection well to put in your bugs.
Yes, right. Probably a regularized grid, depending on the radius of influence. And just as a ballpark, they could be anywhere from 20 to 35 or 40 feet apart. So there'll be just a regular grid.
Grid that's put in.
Yeah.
Thank you. Makes sense.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Harold.
On the K3133 rod. And you've already demonstrated that the concentration is dropping over time. I'm just wondering, did you decide to change the monitoring schedule in the future? Or how are you gonna attack the problem of identifying the contaminants of concern that are left? But you've already demonstrated that you're reducing the concentration of the main.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, Harold. And so we think we've got a pretty good handle on what our contaminants of concern are. The frequency of monitoring will be decided within this remedial action work plan that we're just jumping into right now. So we may determine that not all of our current monitoring well network needs to be sampled quarterly, semi-annually. We may determine that we need more wells in the area.
Right.
So that'll be all part of the process that's fleshed out in the remedial action work plan, which will basically be the groundwater project team getting together and talking through all of that.
What kind of timetable do you think?
So
Is that years or months?
less than a year. We're hoping to have a milestone in place for the removal action work plan, submitting our D1 to EPA and TDEC for their review and approval by, I believe it's the end of March 2025 is what we're hoping for.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a quick question. So the plan that y'all are talking about, is that the pre-design investigation that y'all are gonna be doing, or is that something totally different?
It's similar, but it's for the 3133 project. So the pre-design investigations is specific to the main plant area project. Exactly. So this is the remedial action work plan is for the K31, K33 project.
Okay, then my next question is, what is the timeline on the main plant and the pre-design investigation?
Let's see, I did not reach out on the
This is also a test.
for the main plant area interim.
Just estimate. I mean, you know about how long it usually takes y'all to do one. You don't have to give me a,
So for the document itself, to get that from the date, from when we submit it to the regulators to get it approved, it is not going to take about 9 months to get the document approved.
that's kind of what.
Before that,
Kinda
it can take quite a while. We have a lot of discussions with the regulators, with TDEC and EPA prior to that submittal, because we want to try to get the documents closest to approval as possible before we submit it. And then, so I would say from this point forward, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think it'll be a year before we get those documents approved.
Thank you.
You know, the good news is we have the records of decision.
Those are the important ones.
Yeah.
The not so great news is the groundwater remediation is not done.
Right. It's not.
For people that think the job is over.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just started.
Yes.
Mary.
So understanding we still have work to do and looking at your impressive track record so far, I'm just wondering down the road, when you're done here, when OREM is done and I think legacy management takes over, will they be responsible for monitoring in perpetuity Or will TDEC still do that? How does that work? And then I guess part two is, will there'll still be oversight from EPA and TDEC once you guys are done?
So answer the first question. Will legacy management be taking this over? That is the plan. There are hurdles that we have to get across before we can do that. Some of them are administrative, some of them are funding related, things like that. One that we really sort of struggle with is, for instance, is legacy management has no mechanism in place to take care of classified burial grounds, things that are classified. We have 3 classified burial grounds in ETTP. So we have to figure that out. That's one thing. It's an administrative thing. Then there's a funding issue. And then it's just, there is a fairly lengthy process that you have to go through to turn these things over to legacy management. And they won't, for instance, I mean, until we get final rods signed, they won't take this stuff. So, you know, we've got, there's still probably a number of years that we have before we get to the point where we're ready to turn it over to them. There will always be oversight by EPA and TDEC because under CERCLA, we have what we call the 5-year reviews. When you do a remedy, it's, you know, if you leave contamination in place, any level of it, even if it is a safe level, if there's any left in place, every 5 years after the remedy's been completed, you have to go back and evaluate whether the remedy is still protective or not. You all are involved in that. We have 5-year reviews, and you're invited to attend the meetings to see the information that's presented. So there will always be oversight by, and it's a 3-phase part of the FS, that aspect. So
When's the next one?
we've sort of broken them up now. We used to do them every 5 years, and we have got to the point where there's so much stuff that we have got. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of work we have to do, but we've gotten a lot done. And the 5-year review was getting so big that it was getting very difficult to get it done in the timeline that EPA has to have to meet their requirements. So what we've done is we've broken it down to pieces, and we do one piece each year. So there's parts of it that are done every year. I don't know what we're sure.
Upper East or East Fork Poplar Creek in its entirety.
Yeah.
Chris?
I had a couple questions. So you mentioned watershed areas that was broke down early on. How many are there?
I don't want to say 6, but I can't go back now. Let's see, Belton Valley, Bethel Valley, Bear Creek Valley, Upper East Fork Poplar Creek, East Tennessee Technology Park.
She's got it up on the screen.
You can also point at the big map in the back if needed.
Just, well, done Chestnut Ridge yet, but. And then, and there's sort of, as you can tell, there's a lot of the reservation that's not covered by those colored parts. And so there is sort of it's sort of a non-watershed. It is the non-watershed rod. And a lot of that gets done much later.
8 or 9, something like that.
Less than that, yeah, I want to say 5 or 6. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'm blanking.
The other question I had, the water prohibition. Does that, I know water use, you said water use, but what about water contact? I mean, excuse me, the water table, I don't know how deep it is. I'm just kind of curious about.
It's relatively shallow across East Tennessee Technology Park, and it does account for any exposure to that groundwater. Yes, sir.
Do we have any? Oh, sorry.
Define for me relative.
As
You say relatively shallow, is that?
as shallow as 10 feet.
Okay.
Do we have any questions online? If we do, Christoph, I see you, but that way they can go ahead and start online, raising hands. Christoph, you've got something?
Yes, I would like to go to the slide for a main plant, where you have the goals. Yes, goals for remedial investigation. So I would like to clarify that the finding the extent of the chlorinated volatile organic compound plumes, lateral and vertical, are gonna be for plumes that are not being addressed by the interim action.
Correct.
Because for interim action to work,
They will
need to
delineated
verify.
interim action. Exactly.
You know, you have to know, okay, what you are measuring against.
Thank you. I see there's some chat online. Shelley?
We do have Heather Lutz, who I believe is with TDEC, with a question.
Okay. We will go to online.
I don't have a question, sorry.
Yeah, I did see Heather's hand first.
Okay. And then
Paul.
Bill.
Yep, I see that too.
I don't have a question, sorry.
Paul?
Paul's still muted. There he is.
Yeah, do the sites that Roger referred to that are classified, are those going to require 24-hour safeguards and security coverage?
Yes, as far as they will have security measures such as fencing and whatnot. And then they also have the security patrols will visit them routinely. And they have land use restrictions, and that access is prohibited and nothing can be done inside as far as construction, things like that.
Okay, copy that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions online?
No other questions have been asked in the chat.
Okay. That concludes our presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Guests.
Oh, well, sorry. Are there any questions from our guests?
What about the plumes on the map that look like they're stretching outside of East Tennessee Technology Park? Is any remediation being done outside?
So we have set up a off-site monitoring program that was done back, I think, the early 2010s, where we have sampled a number of residential areas along with some wells that we've installed ourselves. We are not seeing any instances of maximum contaminant levels beyond the border of the reservation in those wells that we sampled.
Is that it? Okay. We will go to public comment.
We do have a couple public comments. We'll let Luther go, and I have some to read into the record later.
Okay.
All right, get it. I'm Luther Gibson. I was a board member from 1999 to 2005, board chair in 2001 and 2, as you've been told many times. I'm also vice president of the Coalition of Oak Ridge Retired Employees. I kind of struggle with what to focus on tonight. I know there's opportunities to comment and get involved in the work plan a little later on. So I ended up going back to a few things I've been reading in the other meeting materials of the other SSABs. And one was particularly interesting. A public comment was made on April 17th by Nevada board member Gary Ilgore from Mesquite, Nevada. And I'm going to quote him here where I say it's him. He said, I would like to make a request, I guess, to EM headquarters that we get these briefings released a day or two before the meeting rather than 10 hours before the meeting. I don't think y'all can get that much, but that's my rejection. I'm sorry. It gives the board very, very little time to review these slides, come up with any questions. I had a busy day today and didn't even get to look at them. And I usually try to go through them and think about my questions beforehand. Beginning at 10 hours before the meeting, 9.5 hours before the meeting is kind of unacceptable in my view. I would really appreciate it if headquarters could release them to the NSSAB office a little sooner. That's that. Then I noticed the EM Nevada makes a field report to the Nevada SSAB. They mentioned findings of 2 Oak Ridge generators that were having to be addressed. These are the red mixed low level waste, I guess, shippers that are going to Nevada. I find it kind of amazing. The Nevada boards hear about these findings, and we don't know about them here. If anything's affecting our access to Area 5, we should know. Then another thing they're doing in Nevada, and this gets into transition long-term stewardship, plus legacy management. In their work plan, they have they have a recommendation this year that involves developing a detailed outline associated with the contents of a site transition plan that will occur over the next several years for transfer of the EM sites on the Nevada National Security Complex to long-term stewardship. A reasonable question is, where are we in that process? And will the SCB be involved or simply briefed afterwards? And then finally, this is on groundwater. On May 7th, the Hanford Advisory Board received a presentation from Chris Johnson, the Pacific Northwest National Lab, on the tracking restoration enclosure, which is a web-based application intended to communicate the status of groundwater contamination efforts at EM sites across the complex. Now, I asked about this last year, and I understood Oak Ridge has provided data, but currently track only contains dated information from Savannah River, Hanford, Idaho, and Webb, Utah. And it could easily be the subject of recommendation, but look at this thing, it's so ambitious to be taken. It's hard to really take it seriously and devote the resources that are needed to support it and maintain it. But I think it would be a good thing if it was used, it was used or could be used. Anyhow, maybe we take a few minutes at the EMS meeting, pull it up, just take a look at it on the screen. So that's what I have tonight.
Thank you, Luther.
That copy.
Yeah.
Additional public comment is in the meeting packet and will be put online from Mr. Doug Colquisher. It's lengthy, but to summarize, it has some concerns about particular land parcels on the west end that he would prefer not be made available by DOE for reindustrialization, and goes into some discussion on how he would like those to be a nature preserve. And again, we will give you copies of the full comment if you are interested in going to record.
About a minute or so. Not minutes, 5 seconds, 5-10 seconds. I have I want to submit later on, as I mentioned during the executive committee meeting, a bunch of recommendations from the Coalition of Oak Ridge Charter employees that the letter we sent Jade earlier in the year. So I didn't want to get that in this nice discussion, but I'll submit it afterwards. I'll get to you next day or so. Thank you. I'm so great.
Okay, next we'll go to call for additions or motions to approve the agenda. Need a motion to approve the agenda, please.
I move as such.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries and it is approved. Are there any requests for new action items? Moving on, our next meeting will be August 14th, which will be our annual meeting and work plan development. I'll get into that a little bit later. And this will end the presentation portion of our meeting. If any of our presenters would like to leave, they may.
See you all later. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go right into our board meeting. So we have two recommendations that we need to discuss this evening. One is on the budget recommendation, and I think I'm gonna pass this over to you because I think you're passing it to.
I'll introduce the quick.
Okay. All right.
So, geez, I think it was back in March when we had our meetings about the budget. It seems like it was so long ago, but at our EMS meeting, of course, we were asked to put forth a recommendation. We agreed to do that. Immediately after the meeting, the group, what do you call it? What do we call?
Discussion group.
Issue group.
Issue group.
The issue group kind of huddled. And we discussed the direction we wanted our recommendation to go in. We considered everything we heard, not only at our various meetings, but we also discussed a presentation that a member from the public had made months before that. And once we decided our direction, we had a few more meetings online back and forth and ultimately came up with the recommendation. For the most part, our priorities match DOE's back 100%. We did want to, however, add the idea or the acknowledgement of the positive performance record that you've had, and wanted to ask you to use that as leverage to possibly request additional funds, specifically to be used for true sludge disposition or processing. And if you don't know what to do with that yet, at least to start the research on that. So that would be our recommendation. So having said all that, one of our newest members and our issue group member for this, Charles Moore, will go ahead and read the recommendation out loud. Thanks, Charles.
So ORSAB supports ORIM's program plan and recommends fully funding the activities that are currently supported by that plan for fiscal year 2026. Broadly understood as follows. Complete remediation and transfer all potential property at East Tennessee Technology Park, ETTP, for closure, including cleanup of physical debris, structures in Poplar Creek and along its shoreline. Continued demolition of excess contaminated facilities at Oak Ridge National Lab, ORNL, and Y-12 National Security Complex, Y-12. Continue to develop infrastructure to enable future cleanup at ORNL and Y-12. The Mercury Treatment Facility, including mercury remediation technology development. Circular Waste Disposal Facility, Environmental Management Disposal Facility, EMDF. Continued disposition of U-233 material. Continued disposition and processing of legacy transuranic debris and sludges, including contact handled and remote handled. Maintain and operate facilities at ORNL and Y-12. With this support, ORSAB recommends funding the fiscal year 2026 budget to include all activities necessary to complete these cleanup priorities in an effective, timely, and safe manner. ORSAB is also concerned about spending federal dollars in an effective, timely, and responsible manner. It believes ORIM, with its contractors, have recently demonstrated an effective cleanup rate that leads the nation among federally funded facilities over a significant period of time. Therefore, ORSAB recommends ORIM use this record of performance as a shining example of effective project management and as leverage to request additional funding beyond what is necessary to support the fiscal year 2026 program plan above. Further, ORSAB recommends this additional federal funding to be used to develop new knowledge and new technologies to effectively clean up transuranic waste, debris, and sludges, legacy, current, and future, starting in fiscal year 2026, rather than waiting for an undetermined date in the future. ORSAB believes that if Oak Ridge is to play a leading role in the nation's future nuclear renaissance, this is a reasonable recommendation and one where federal dollars will be wisely spent in the interest of our nation.
Thank you, Charles. We appreciate you jumping in and helping us with that this evening. Well, we have to have a motion. I need a motion to take the recommendation to push it to headquarters.
So there can also be discussion. You guys can.
Well, usually I have to have the motion, then we'll go to discussion. I have a motion and a second to accept the recommendation as presented. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion online?
Seeing none.
Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Wait a minute, Paul raised his hand for the motion, or for the vote.
I was voting for.
Okay, we kind of figured that, Paul. I was just making sure that everybody saw your hand there.
I was just
Okay,
slow on I was slow on the button.
Okay, then the recommendation, this recommendation passes. You're gonna read that part. I always like to get the vice chair, involved in this. So while we were at the chairs meeting, there was another recommendation that we actually came up with during our meeting. It was brought to our attention that, IT, which some of y'all probably have had some experience with IT before, was wanting to, cut down the website and take some things off there. And so the chairs came up with a recommendation, about what to do and how to address that with IT. So I'm gonna let Chris read the recommendation.
The board recommends that EMSSAB website maintain and keep documents related to board activities in perpetuity. The documents shall be in a searchable, archival, online location available to the public. These documents include, but are not limited to, recommendations, responses, and minutes. Recommendation.
We felt that it was the chairs felt that it was very important to keep all documents on that website for future board members could go and research anything that they wanted to. We didn't feel that it was a good idea to remove any of it, but to maybe put it in a searchable, like it says, where it could be archived and anybody could go and look at it. So I need a motion to accept this recommendation.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this recommendation from the chair's meeting? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting this recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Both recommendations have passed. Okay, moving on. We need to vote to approve the previous minutes, yes, meeting minutes. Have you read over them?
I have said them and both make a motion that they be approved.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the previous meeting minutes. Is there all in favor? Just ask for discussion, yes. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Did anybody see anything? Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes as written?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. So next we have, and I think it's in your all's packet about the election coming up. There should be a notice for any of those that would like to, run for any of the offices you may nominate. You may nominate yourself, you may nominate others. Am I correct about that? Kelly?
You may nominate others with their consent.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. I knew there was something I was leaving out there. But if you're interested in an office, it's always great to let Shelley know in advance. However, we can do nominations from the floor, the day or the evening of the meeting. But usually it's better if we go ahead and have an idea of who's interested. So that way, if we need to fill a position or for example, if I decide not to run for chair, it gives other people, it lets them know. So that way they can say, hey, that might be something good for me to do. So if you can get that to Shelley, that would be great. But there again, somebody might come up and say, I've thought about this and I've thought about this and that's something I'd like to do. So nominations can be made from the floor. Did I miss anything, Shelley?
So how long are you're the current chair.
I can serve 2 terms.
You can serve 2 terms, so can
any of
Chris or
the
any of the board members.
Yeah, since we're all new, we can all serve another term. But like, for example, if Harriet had served as secretary already too, then she could move to a different position, but she couldn't serve a third.
And when do you need the information turned in?
Shelley?
So we are required to present a slate at the annual planning meeting, and then we'll vote at the next meeting. We're supposed to give everybody a couple months. So I would really appreciate it if you get it to me by like the end of July, so I can make that slate. But as she said, we can take nominations from the floor during the actual vote.
This says Amy's not eligible.
I
So
just
again,
saw
she
that.
is this shape.
I was looking at it, but I don't think that's.
Well, throw me out. I'll see that going.
You just said.
I am eligible.
You are eligible.
I am eligible. This time, if it's said.
Look at that going.
They said otherwise.
Yeah.
You wrote that note.
Now we know. How dare you.
Well, Amy doesn't mind serving an extra year, just so y'all know. I actually enjoy this board. It's been very educational, and it's been actually fun, believe it or not. The tours, there are so much that we get to do as board members that we would never have gotten to do just as a member of the public.
That's right.
And to me, that has been very rewarding in my life. And now that I've got some extra time on my hands, although Harriet says I don't, there's other things I'd like to be able to do with the board.
So in 2023, Amy was vice chair, and in this year she is chair. So those are two separate positions, and she is eligible to serve a second term as chair.
You just missed a typo there, didn't you?
Legal.
You tell it was on her mind.
Well, a lot of times, and somebody just told me this, you cannot proofread your own stuff.
Yeah,
That's right.
not effectively.
It has been told,
Cross-eyed.
yeah, it's been told to me several times. Next thing we have is responses to my recommendations.
Yeah, and the DDFO report, we've combined that. We don't have any recommendations open yet. You've approved one tonight, so we'll have a response for your next time. But right now, we don't have any current open recommendations. I wanted to reiterate what Amy said about being elected. I do know that all of our current board members are eligible for the positions they're currently in, but they're also eligible for any other position. Everyone else that wants to volunteer, we would love to have, more people get involved. If you're not sure you want to do it this time and you think you might be next time, then what I'd like to do is encourage you to get involved in the issue groups. That's when we look at each issue that we talk on a topic, and you kind of get together and talk with a smaller group. And that just helps get you involved with the different items that we've got on our agendas. Another thing is to actively participate in the EM stewardship. What we're asking for now is a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary for the board. Once we make that vote and we determine our officers, we will then have a follow-up EM stewardship meeting where we will vote on a chair and vice chair for the EM stewardship committee. So if you don't feel like you're ready for a full board, we highly recommend you look at being the vice chair or chair for the EM stewardship, because that allows you to kind of get that experience on a smaller, more informal level. Plus it gets you to be a participant at our executive meeting so that you can kind of see what the full board does in that executive meeting. So I highly recommend that if you don't feel like you're ready for one of these main positions, to definitely apply for the EM chairs, EM stewardship committee, because that is a great stomping ground to help get you ready for that next level. The other thing I wanted to let you know, Eric mentioned the EM chairs meeting that we're going to be hosting in September. We're actively working on getting that planned out. You'll get more details as we move along. That one, typically, when we have a chairs meeting at another location, we're only able to send 2 to 3 people, and usually that's the chair, vice chair, and secretary. But for this meeting, everyone here can come and attend and sit in the audience. So it's a great way to see what happens at the chairs meeting, so that if you do move forward and become a chair or a vice chair and you're representing us at a chairs meeting in the future, it helps you get to see hands-on what's involved and what they do at this meeting. The other thing, annual planning meeting we mentioned is in August. We had that on the work plan as to be determined, but now we voted at the executive meeting. We're going to move forward with that. It'll be roughly a 2 to 2.5 hour meetings, 6 to 8. And we will discuss what topics DOE would like for you to look at the next year. EPA and TDEC will provide their topics that they would like for you to look at. And then we will open it up for discussion for the members to talk about what they'd like for us to focus on. We will use that information for DOE. We'll put together your work plan for next year. So it's a real important meeting to be at. And we will do it hybrid also. So if something happens, you can't be in the room, you can watch it online. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Melissa,
Thank you, Melissa.
can I ask you a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
For the chairs meeting, is TDEC excluded? This is only for SSAB?
Any member of the public can come.
Okay.
The way it works is there'll be a U-shaped room that only the chair and vice chair from each site will sit at. Then you'll have a grouping of tables where we will sit back, and then there'll be an area for the members of the public to sit. So yes, y'all will be welcome to come to that too, and sit in the audience. You can actually participate during the public comment period also. We will get those dates and everything. That will all be sent out as part of our mailers once we've got everything established. It's September, the date escapes me right now.
The 24th, I believe, is the actual meeting. Let me look at the calendar.
Yeah, and the paper, it says 24th to the 26th.
Okay, 26, yes.
So will be a tour, which is members and staff only. The 25th is a full day meeting, and the 26th is currently scheduled as a half day. So those will be at our venue, and we'll send out information about that.
Has a venue been decided yet, or?
It's the DoubleTree. They have a large enough ballroom to accommodate everyone we expect.
So that's everything we have, Amy.
Thank you. I do encourage everybody to attend that chairs meeting. I know Chris went for the first time and Mary went the first time in the spring, and I think both learned a lot, didn't you?
Yeah, very informative.
It's very neat.
Good to meet people
See
from
them.
other sites and hear about their issues relative to ours.
So the chairs meeting, I have learned a lot at the chairs meeting about the other sites. That is one thing I will say, is that has been very interesting to see the challenges that they have at other sites that we don't have. That's been one of the main things, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the main.
So I do encourage everybody to come to the chairs meeting, especially since we have it here and we're hosting it. The more of Chris people, more of our board members that are there. It looks really good for us to have you all there.
Well, in addition to the other folks, you get headquarters presentations from the people from headquarters, which are invaluable, so you get a whole different perspective from them too.
So the 24th is only for board members, and then the 25th and 26th are open to the public as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Because 24th will be the tour. Yeah. Okay. Next will be committee reports and the executive meeting. We met last Wednesday. Just to kind of give you an update, basically everything that we talked about during the executive meeting, Melissa's gone over, Shelley's mentioned some, I've mentioned some. Basically we were just kind of getting everything laid out for the chairs meeting, for the annual meeting. It was just to make sure that we had everything lined up and we were ready to go and prepared. There really wasn't a whole lot of other updates. I didn't miss anything because a lot of it's already been mentioned through the meeting. Yeah, the 2 recommendations we wanted to make sure were in y'all's packet.
Are we having an executive meeting on the 7th?
Yes, yes, we always have one before our meeting. But y'all do have July off. I'll let you know that. The next executive board meeting will be August 7th. And then I'm going to turn this over, the EM stewardship over to Mary. But before I do, I want to say that EM stewardship is actually where I started as chair, and it really helped. It really helped before I came on to the board the executive board for here. It gave me some perspective of what actually went on at the executive meetings, or what actually happened kind of behind the scenes, and what was required of the full board. So that is a good place to start, even if it's just as a volunteer. It is really a good place to start. If you're interested in volunteering.
Yeah, it's kind of where you go and roll up your sleeves and.
And go to work, yeah.
So, yeah, our next meeting is June 26th, and we'll discuss this issue that we talked about today. Further detail, and that'll be 2 days after a tour of ETTP groundwater. So we'll have more information from that tour as well. Now, a recommendation isn't required by DOE on this topic, but I don't want to discourage anyone from not attending the meeting because, especially for the issue group members, we may decide we want to put forward a recommendation. And you don't really know until we get to that meeting. So if you can attend, it's very helpful and very much appreciated, whether it be online or in person. The issue group members are Bartholomew, Butler, Jones, McCormick, McCurdy, Michaels, and Sharp. Shape in advance.
Might I add one piece? Sam will be here, probably most likely virtually, but that is also a chance that as you go home and you think about the presentation, or after you've gone to the tour, all of a sudden something comes to mind that you want to ask. Sam will be back here at that meeting to ask, to answer any questions that might have come up that you didn't think of while you were at this meeting. Because sometimes it helps. Go home, think about it, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I'm not sure what this is. So he will be back at that meeting to answer any follow-up questions.
And also in your pack is the rod. So y'all might, you might read over it and you might go, hey, I should have asked about that.
It's the meat of the rod. It's
Yeah, there's nothing,
Yeah.
the rod's online if you want to go through the rod.
the part that you have is
Can you just condense it for us, Harriet? Because I know you're real good at that.
Condense what? The rod?
Yeah.
Rod's a rod. They got it.
They do have the full rod.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I looked at the full rod and it was like, oh, boy.
So if there is a tight time frame between when you send it and this meeting, there's always another 2 weeks beyond that. By
Yeah.
the time we get to EMS and everything. So there's plenty of time to do your research if you so desire.
Yeah, getting the presentation to you guys, by the time we try to work it through the headquarters review, we try to get it to you as soon as we can. But we do know that even if you don't get it with sufficient time here, you have your 2-week window where we offer you a tour. You can look at it further then and then follow up questions the following week. That's why we set up the meeting schedule the way we did to give you basically a 2-week period to look at it. And I did want to, like Mary said, we're not requiring a recommendation. That is something we put out there, like for the budget, we do require a recommendation. But for any of our other ones, if we don't require it, we put that in there, but that never means you can't do a recommendation. That's just meaning that for this particular topic, we're not requiring you one. If we put you were required, you'd have to come up with something. We usually say no unless it's something we definitely have to have your recommendation.
So what's the next step by DOE with the recommendation that we've made?
With the budget?
Yeah.
That will come to us. We've got 60 days to provide you back a response. And what we do is that particular recommendation will be submitted to headquarters, but we will send you, we will prepare a response back to you, basically saying we appreciate your recommendation and that we have submitted it to headquarters. And if there's a specific question in your recommendation that we need to answer, we'll respond to that.
Okay.
It goes both ways from you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Moving on, are there any wow, are there any additions to the agenda or any closing remarks?
Yay.
If you
Christoph.
allow me, I have a closing remark. I would like to extend appreciation to DOE for their efforts on the groundwater on our preservation.
We might make a recommendation after all, and not accept the RODs. No. Just kidding.
You may not like those.
Parking lot.
Thanks to the state and EPA for being part of the tripod and
And-
getting to where we are today.
Yeah.
And Samantha, thank you very much for the nomination. And thank you very much for bringing back the good news that you did tonight. Thank you.
Use it as leverage, guys.
Definitely will.
If there's no further business, motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I second.
Motion to adjourn and second. I'm not going to even ask for discussion. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? See y'all in 2 weeks.